My guest is Arriale Starbird. I wanted to talk with Arriale because this is a roundabout way. I had a dream after the interview that I did with J.M. DeBoard, and he was talking about having a nightmare for 30 years. And he's a dream interpreter. And this is the very last thing that actually he wanted to talk about because it was much more intense than a typical dream. And when he finally went to a shaman, he was cleared of an entity that had stalked him because his family had been cursed decades previous, incarnations previous. This was a completely different area that he didn't want to get into, but because of what he does as a dream interpreter expert, he also decided that he would disclose something personal. So in that vein, other people on Reddit, where he does a lot of his interviews and contact and helps people, they get into demons and other kinds of entities that can harass you. So I thought, I need help. And I dreamed in the dream that my Uncle John was standing in front of a big screen, and there was information on the screen. And I asked the guides in the dream, okay, so I'm going to work with my Uncle John. They said, no, that's his first name. And then they showed me I'm standing on a headstone and looking at the name under my feet. I can only see the last half, S-T-O-N. This is someone who is deceased. His first name is John, and the last name has those letters. And I find in Sedona, John Livingston. His book, Adversaries Walk Among Us. Since he's deceased, I needed someone to represent him. So there is my roundabout story of how I connected with Arriale Starbird. Arriale, was that a long enough story for you?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Of course, it's not the first time I'm hearing it, but every time it's interesting for me to hear it because I love when the divine guidance comes in and despite all odds, brings us exactly what we need.
You also had a connection with John, and that's how you found him to start out with.
Yeah, that's right. And I also met him first in a dream. So he of course works with dreams, and shamans are walking between the worlds all the time. When I was a teenager, I was having a lot of nightmares at that time, and I learned about lucid dreaming, and I taught it to myself. I think from a book, and I was successful at it. I was able to control my dreams, and at some point, I was able to escape from negative situation in the dream and walk into a very nice, beautiful wooded area of a residential neighborhood. And I met a person there that I did not know in physical life, and we had a very interesting conversation. And I felt like I was getting some guidance. And it was profound enough that I remembered it even till now. This has happened, many decades ago. But then I met 10 or 12 years later, I actually met John in real life. And after a while, I put the two and two together that was actually him. And I don't know if your listeners know anything about John, but I'll just mention a little bit. John Livingston was a trained therapist, clinical hypnotherapist, past life regression therapist, spiritual counselor, Shamanic Energy Healer, Shamanic Master Exorcist, with experience in traditional and core shamanism, as well as Western models of psychological counseling. He was a marriage and family therapist since the 1970s. And I studied shamanic energy medicine with John for 9 years. And initially he came to a referral, and I didn't immediately realize that was the person in the dream. It was a while after that.
You also, in your services, offered something that I thought was an immediate connection, was the opportunity to have psychic self-defense instruction. Just to introduce yourself and who you are, because I've kind of, covered everything except saying what you do and what your background is. Fill us in.
Absolutely. So I'm a holistic health and fitness coach, personal trainer, and shamanic energy medicine practitioner. And since 2005, I've helped over 3,000 people in over 32 states in the United States and over 12 countries to radically transform their lives and their health. And my goal is to assist every person to self-realize themselves on the path of self-mastery and the attainment of total health of their spirit, soul, mind, and body.
When you worked with John, what was the takeaway? What was the best thing that from him you learned to work in terms of your own philosophy?
John was a very, very unique teacher. I've never had a teacher like him prior to that, and I have never had a teacher like that after, and I don't think I ever will. I think one like him is enough for the entire life, even though I've had other teachers, I've studied other things. But he was really more like a father. I always felt like he adopted me, and he was my spiritual father who actually raised me. This may sound a little maybe radical, but I felt like I was a wolf in a city. I just felt like I was just, there's like a wild spiritual nature to me that didn't fit into the boxes of our modern world. And I felt like John very much resonated with those qualities, and I felt very more at home with the shamanic path and a lot of other things. And so I think what he did is that he helped me to sharpen my natural psychic abilities and make them usable for our society. Because I was born intuitive and psychic, but I had no idea how do you turn that into a service that helps humanity. And he was kind of an expert at that because he was very, very psychic naturally as well. And of course, the main training that I got from him, that therapeutic, you could say, is in the healing arts of clearing negative attachments and clearing negative energy. And like I said, I've read other books about it. I've had other teachers, but they were not even, they couldn't even do a fraction of what John could do. And not to say John was always perfect, and that he was, he was also on his path of learning, and there were things that he was really struggling with himself. And that's also for an interesting story for another time. But I feel that what I learned from John in the 9 years of working together, even now, it doesn't get old. It's always useful. And I feel like the skills that I then developed in my psychic self-defense course, like I think Einstein said, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I kind of feel like that then the work I developed later by working with very difficult clients, it was all based on the foundation of knowledge and skill that I learned with John, if that makes sense.
Okay, so the difference working with a shaman, what does that involve?
Well, it's a lot of shamanic journey and a lot of working with the soul. It's about building the soul, because sometimes it's easier for me to explain what it is by saying what it's not. So, like if you look at conventional Western medicine, it's very reductionist and materialistic. Like if you go to a regular doctor, they'll give you a diagnosis, some kind of a label, and they'll either tell you to take medication or a surgery or some kind of injection. But there's really not an in-depth discovery of what was the emotional trauma or what was the soul problem or what was the story that the internal conflict within your emotions and within your soul that had led to that situation for your life. And that's essentially what a shaman would do. Therapists are supposed to do that, but it's like they don't really even do that either. A lot of therapy now is just basically mind control, it's behavior control. It's some of it is useful. I'm not disparaging anything, but some of it can be useful for people to learn how to fit into a society if they have behavioral problems. And in that sense, that's very useful. But that doesn't necessarily heal the soul. And so shamans work with the soul. Well, how do you do that? A lot of it is about deeper emotional archetypes and stories, past life connections, and spiritual, your spiritual identity, which is not the same thing as religion either. Religion doesn't really heal the soul either. Maybe initially they were supposed to, but I have a lot of clients who are very dissatisfied with, they come to me because they're dissatisfied with, they were not getting what they needed spiritually from whatever religious path they were on. And they're not looking for another religion. They're looking to deeply heal. And I find that shamanism is what provides that. It's the medicine for the spirit and the soul, which then extends into mental and emotional and physical too.
When I talked with the dream expert, and he experienced something that some people would call an entity, a demon, a parasite, because of a curse. That goes into what you do for spiritual clearing, cleansing, release, extraction, depossession, all of that you are familiar with. And how do people know that this is something that's actually, I mean, it took him 30 years because of our Western ideology that this is not real to actually get help. So how do you deal with people who come to you and determine when there is something that is an external attachment rather than an internal mental issue? Is that a good way to approach that question?
That's a really, really good question. And the answer is several-fold. And I'm really going to try to simplify it just for the sake of time, right? Because I could expound on this for the next 5 days. Because I love the topic. I used to, in the first phase of my business, this is all I did. I worked essentially as a doing shamanic work only. And then I included the nutrition and the fitness. But I love the topic so much I could write many books. But to simplify it, sometimes people don't know. Sometimes they do know. Sometimes people know very well that there's an entity or an energy there, and they even develop a relationship with it. And sometimes they develop a relationship so that they can have daily conversations with the entity. To be quite honest, some people want the entity there, and they even say it. I don't want it removed. I would be bored. And some people just don't know it's there, and if they did, they would want it removed. But sometimes they are willing to do what it takes to get it cleared, and sometimes they're not. It's going to take work, because whatever their internal beliefs and choices that led up to them getting the entity, that they would have to change their lifestyle and change their identity and beliefs to become the kind of person that's no longer a magnet for that kind of entity. That can be quite a bit of work for some people.
What I also like is you address from your website the energies of space, because people go into a house or a business and there are other beings, entities, energies already there. And sometimes you're aware of that, other times you're not. And sometimes they wait until you have decided that this is a good space for you and then decide to say, oh, by the way, didn't want to scare you off. Here I am. But that's another element with this, is that when people do have odd dreams or odd premonitions about the space around them, not necessarily an attachment to themselves, but the attachment to the space. Can you address that?
Yeah, anything can get an attachment. A person, an animal, a person of any age, including in utero, an object, a car, a tree, a part of an object, a part of a person. You know, it's like if this is really getting into nitty gritty, but some people have like multiple. They used to call it empathy, multiple personality, then they call it dissociative. The point is sometimes people have a very distinct parts within themselves. Sometimes a part can have an entity, but not the other part. So it can get very interesting when you start to really look at it. And sometimes things can have an attachment that's affecting them from the past. In the past, there was an attachment. When in the past, there was something negative there. It's not there in the present, but that past is bleeding into the present. So all of those things are possible. Sometimes it's bleeding in from the future. So as a shaman that works with timelines, all of that plays into how we work with this. There's many, many variables at play. And I think that's why you don't see a shaman in every corner, because most of this kind of quantum thinking is way beyond the average person. The fact that you can have 5 different timelines all impacting each other, and you can have different entities and different timelines, all of them impacting that person in one, you know. And the reason I feel that is because I know you mentioned you have some listeners who are really down the rabbit hole, so they might appreciate this information. But for the average person, when they come in, they don't know any of that. They just know that their life is falling apart. That's how they would know. To answer that, a little bit of that previous question, how would they know? Their life is falling apart. They have addictions. They have health problems. They have financial problems. They might get a job and then quickly lose it. They don't seem to have stability. When their life is really falling apart and they've tried everything at a human level that they can think of trying, maybe even therapy, maybe even medication, and still all those problems are there, that's when they turn to God and they say, "This is something spiritual. This is beyond human," and then they seek me out.
You also said that you had some examples from clients, of course, having given permission. Well, what could you share?
Yes, of course, and I only share with permission. So I have so many interesting case studies of my clients and a lot of success stories. So one of them in particular that I'm thinking of, I'm going to share because this is a very extensive story, but I'm going to narrow it down. This person used to be a martial artist. I was very serious about it, had a good job and traveled a lot, and then he got cancer. You know, driving in smog and traveling and eating junk food and just having a very, very stressful, busy life eventually led, even though he was trying to be healthy, it led to have cancer. And after that point, a lot of supernatural experiences started to happen to him. Like at some point, he was walking down the stairs. He saw his nephew, and his nephew said, "Oh, I just saw you walk like in front of me." And so like there was like another him. And from what I understand, that's where the walk-in happened. Because then what he then experienced with surviving cancer and surviving surgeries and all of that was so traumatic and so difficult. It's possible that the original soul that was there wouldn't have been able to make it. But a walk-in walked in, and so he went through chemo. He went through multiple surgeries. He lost his houses. He lost his job. It was like a real tragedy in this person's life. So the reason I mentioned that, why that's important, is because typically people go through some sort of very, very serious crisis before they turn to the spiritual. Prior to that, he was just he you know, in his own words, he was a complete normie. He lived in 3D. He ate garbage. He worried about money and bills. That was really important. You know, he cared what kind of car he had. He wasn't really doing too many other than his martial arts practice. He really wasn't doing much spiritual stuff. But because when you lose everything and you're left just, you know, alone with God, alone with reality, then unfortunately that's the only time that people really, really become very spiritually oriented. And at that point, he started to see a lot of fairies all around him, all the time. And he also started to see extraterrestrials. And he was developing relationships with them all. And conversations, very interesting. And he took a lot of, you know, he's got many, many journals of all the different conversations he's had. And he started to have memories of having been in the secret space program when he was younger. Many, 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 many different things. So in a way, we concluded that the reason he had that physical health crisis was to give him a break from the material world so he can have all those spiritual experiences, which enriched his soul tremendously. And to make a very long story short, over time, we're working together. We've now been working together maybe 6 years, weekly, and where we do a lot of shamanic work, as well as nutrition and fitness. We do everything, all the services that I offer. He's one of these really, really great clients who's just at this point willing to do whatever it takes to get better, and he's had tremendous success so far. So all of his psychic channels were opening up, and he was able to even speak other languages. Like he would, at some point, he was speaking what we believe are angelic languages or extraterrestrial languages. Spontaneously. And he basically, during the course of us working together, we found that he is like a hybrid. Archangel Raphael and Archangel Michael at some point revealed this to him, that he's 1/3 fairy. It's called it's like a gnome, or that's the fairy realm, but one of the fae kind. Not like a female fairy, not like that, but that kind of soul. And then 1/3 angelic, and then 1/3 human. And because he's a hybrid, that's why he has all these unusual, interesting experiences. So that's the spiritual discovery that's been going on for him as he was physically healing. And on the physical level, he had an entire resume of physical issues. He had a spine issue, he had sleep apnea, he had obesity, he had diabetes, a cancer, and a few other things. I can't even remember all the things that he had. But then he lost the weight. Then the sleep apnea went away. The diabetes went away. A lot of the spinal issues went away. So at least half of all that stuff within like the first 3 or 4 years of us working together, we resolved all that. Now we're working to get him to have the energy that he needs to be independent, to actually be able to return to work and function. And he really wants to, now he's motivated, now he wants to stay alive, not just for himself, but because he wants to share his story with the world of how he healed and how he went through all this stuff and remembered his space program experiences, being in service in space, and how that actually also is part of his trauma because it impacted him in a way that caused him some injury. And by the way, just a disclosure here, I don't necessarily buy into everything my clients tell me or don't tell me. I'm there to facilitate their healing. So if he has memories of being in a secret space program, if he has memories of being on the other planet, I'm not there to say, yes, it happened or no, it didn't happen. This is his story. I'm retelling his story and what is real to him. You know, like I studied also, for example, with Brian Weiss, and he's often asked, well, how do you know, like, if people, Brian Weiss is a past life regression therapist. Sometimes people ask him, how do you know if any of that is real? You know, those memories that people come up with. How do you know that's not imagination? And he said, it really doesn't matter, because if it causes them, if it causes them to lose the symptoms of those problems, or, you know, the fatigue, the cancer, the other issues, if by healing those internal conflicts, they're able to heal, does it ultimately really matter if it's quote real or imaginary? And so to me, I'm not like in the business trying to prove one way or the other if this is real or not. But to him, this is real. And to him, in discovering these things and working through them, he's able to heal. He's actually on the physical. He's able to heal his mind, his body. He does not currently have cancer. He does not currently have diabetes. He doesn't currently have a sleep problem. He doesn't currently have sleep apnea or high blood pressure or any of those things. He's way better now than he was before. So as a result, it means that this is worthwhile to look at these past stories and situations. And if someone doesn't think it's real, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean?
Arriale Starbird. We're going to take a quick break. Back with Arriale Starbird. Again, the website holistichealthcoachingny.com. You mentioned, and just kind of offhand, the 5 different timelines. Could you pick up something about that and explain how that works?
Yes. Well, that's very interesting. And of course, I'm not a quantum physicist, I have to say. So my knowledge of that is very limited. And my knowledge of that is entirely experiential. So in shamanic journeys, you can explore other timelines. And it is very possible that one person could have very different lives and very different experiences in these different timelines and draw upon them. And we use that technique for healing. So, for example, in another timeline, he's completely healed. He's 100% totally healthy, and we need to see what that looks like. And then we can take some of that energy and transfer it into his life here, and he will start to resemble more of that timeline. Greg Braden talks about there's Linda Taggart, they talk a lot about this quantum universe and how this entanglement and how time actually isn't linear. And even when we talk about timelines, they're not even really lines. It's an illusion of perception of a line, of a consistent line. But actually, we jump back and forth between possibilities and realities all the time. It's so natural for us, we don't even realize how we do it on a daily basis. You might be jumping from one timeline to another 5 times a day. And sometimes if you pay attention, you can notice it. You'll notice a glitch in literally in time. Like you'll be doing something, you'll look at the clock and it's 2, and then literally later it's 3. What happened to that hour? Sometimes people find something is going on during that hour, but sometimes you'll find it is because timelines got shifted. And hopefully for the better. There's all kinds of things that can happen, but even without noticing it, you can shift timelines. It's just that our mind fills in the gaps. fills in what, because we're not comfortable with the unknown, so the mind fills it in. So, well, probably I did this and probably that happened. But there's a lot more to all this. And, my main goal is enlightenment and healing. So there's of course also, I must mention this because this is something we encounter on this planet. There is a duality. There's good and evil, light and dark. And there's a way to manipulate time and timeline for personal gain or for different types of manipulative purposes. And some people do that. Like we're talking about the secret space program. So that's a way to manipulate timelines and manipulate people's consciousness to exploit it without them knowing it. But you certainly can also override it when your mind is strong enough. But how many people on the planet have strong enough mind? So this is why it really behooves us to cultivate our mind and our heart power and cultivate personal power. And that's what shamanism also teaches and focuses on, cultivation of personal power, because you need power to build reality. You can have beliefs, you can have wishes, intentions, and very good and noble ideas, but if you don't have power, you can't bring them into fruition. You will always be at the mercy of people who are more powerful than you, who's bidding you end up doing. And so to not become prey to your various astral leeches and various sorcerer type of personalities, or even other people's force of character that we may not necessarily want to abide by, it is very important to cultivate mindfulness and awareness and be very in tune with your true nature in your heart and soul, and build on a foundation of health. So, in doing the work that I do, I find that most people don't actually have foundations of health. They're not building their reality on solid ground. They're building on, at best, like a shaky foundation, or just complete chaos. And so as a result, they have a lot of ups and downs, and they don't heal on their own. And so I think when shamanism comes in, it's a very, very ancient healing tradition. It's something that was lost. And it's something that helps to repair that foundation, because the foundation of person is the soul and the spirit. And for a lot of people, we kind of threw out various religions, and maybe some of us replaced it with New Age, but a lot of people didn't replace it with anything. There's just nothing there. They don't have any specific tools or knowledge of how to establish and maintain foundations of health or spirituality. And so, nature abhors vacuums. So when you have no knowledge and nothing, well, negativity jumps in there. And that's where chaos ensues. And that's where the dark astral leeches and the dark sorcerer types take advantage of the situation and are able to manipulate people who are not knowledgeable. I believe it's even in the Bible, there's a saying, my people perish for lack of knowledge. There's certainly a lack of knowledge, even of the basics of health in the world right now. So I do my best to educate people in self-care and maintaining those foundations. And to me, shamanism is a core part of that foundation. It may not be that way for everyone. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but for me and for a lot of clients that I work with, it's imperative. I know I wouldn't be alive right now without these tools. And I think a lot of my clients feel the same. They even tell me, I feel like you saved my life. I feel John saved my life. He would never say that himself, but I felt that way. But it's the tools, it's the shamanic knowledge, if that makes sense. It's spirit itself, if that makes sense.
What I like about this is 10 or so, maybe 15 years ago, I interviewed a woman who, before we were talking about this on the multiple levels that people are now doing podcasts, she practiced quantum jumping. And she's like another one who practices quantum jumping, Cynthia Sue Larson, but she did her own version. And she had 3 different sets of clothes, each a different size, because daily she would have to look in her closet and see what size she was. And that was one of those things where it was so far ahead of what we were talking about at that time, that we're now talking about these things of time shifts and UFOs and entities and having a real connection with those kinds of realities. It doesn't mean you have to believe it. I just wanted to throw that in there because the things we're talking about now, a lot of people are more educated about than they were 10 or 20 years ago, because this stuff was still very taboo. And the shamanism was something that was an esoteric practice that maybe only indigenous people were able to do. And it's just a way of describing with language what it is to be metaphysically aware. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. And I want to say that there is a strong connection between ancient shamans and the shamanic practices and the star people, what they call the star people, which is like extraterrestrial people not of this planet. And I guess for maybe the newbies listening, I mean, newsflash, there's lots of people all over the universe. There's a definitive, powerful, very significant connection between shamans, the ancient shamanic practices and knowledge, and the extraterrestrial races, which the shamans call the star people, of many different timelines and many different constellations and universes. There's beings coming here all the time. And so nowadays, it's not so much that, well, maybe it's accurate to say that shamanism changed, but I think it's more accurate to say that because there's so many now star seeds on the planet, they are naturally bringing in some of that shamanic knowledge that used to only be available to people who would do various, very complicated rituals and ceremonies to access that knowledge and access those realms. There's more and more people, I think since the 70s, who are born who naturally carry it already within them. They don't have to do a complicated ceremony. They already know it. And partly that's to help with the evolution and to help with the not going into World War III and to help humanity to heal from past trauma. There's many reasons why all these star seeds are on the planet. But what it means is that to a larger degree, people don't need to rely on substances. So, like, for example, for me, and I only found this out in working with John, that what is normal to me is what would be called shamanism. I was already like that when I was a child. To me, I didn't have to take any substances. I didn't do it through ceremony. I was raised by atheists in an atheistic country, actually in a communist country. So we didn't have any religion. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't get any of that. I was told we came from monkeys and all that crap. And but I was naturally spiritual, and I remember even like my parents were surprised. They were like, I don't know how you know this, where you're getting this. Why are you naturally believing in God? And so and also the natural intuitive abilities, being able to see other dimensional or other beings that live here on the planet with us. It was all very, very natural. And I was shocked to find that a lot of other people didn't see that. And I'm like, well, why don't you see it? What's wrong? What's going on here? You know, why aren't you seeing all the, extraterrestrials, or why aren't you having paranormal dreams? And I know that when I was first, as a child, I may have been in the minority, but I think it's shifted to the, very significantly, where I could be wrong, but I think it's more than 50%. More than 50% of the planet are actually now newer star seeds. Some could say, well, everyone is really from the stars. We're all seeded. Sure, very possible, but some are very old here. Some souls are here for a very, very long time. And that's why the whole point of the karma, and they're stuck here and they can't get out, and the star seeds are sent in to try to help them to get out of the matrix. I don't know how successful we as star seeds have been to help those souls who are stuck in the matrix to get out of the matrix. But I think we have been successful in preventing some of the worst case scenarios that would have ensued, like the destruction of the planet. That would have been very, very awful. And that has not happened. And I right now don't think it will happen. Also, obviously, there's people talking about it, and some people are claiming that they have the power to do that. I don't think it's allowed, and I think there's a lot more positive now that's preventing that from happening. What do you think about that?
I think we have the potential to disrupt whatever timeline is running, whatever program is running. And I don't know that that means that we'll experience a linear progression. I think there are other things possible that we haven't begun to fathom because it isn't in our frame of reference and our context. We tend to be a linear society, at least in the Western hemisphere, Western world. But I do believe there are other realities that are right now intersecting. And for whatever reason, I do think we have the power to transcend into a different timeline. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes. I completely agree with that. I think we've been doing it, but it's a timeline war. And so there is they call them the white hats and the black hats. Well, they're using everything at their disposal. And yeah, they use energy and they use physical weapons and they use propaganda and media, but they literally fight with timeline. The black hats want to bring about a dark timeline. The white hats want to bring about a more positive timeline. But I think true shamanism is beyond the duality. It's actually beyond the duality. And that's the difficult part, because how do you go beyond duality? Duality is all we know here. And so it comes down to, this is really, I'm just going to kind of plant a seed for further conversation later. But essentially it's about integrating the truth from both sides. Because there's truth on both sides and illusion on both sides. We've got to get rid of the illusion, integrate the truth to move forward to the next level beyond duality. But like people are talking about going from 3D to 4D to 5D, et cetera, et cetera. But even at 5 and 6D, there's still duality. So it's like you have to even go beyond that. It goes into they call it the ineffable or spirit, where there's no more timeline and there's no more duality. And that would be called the true reality. But for a lot of people, that doesn't exist. For a lot of people, all we have here is this duality. And so people they don't know how to think outside of that. But in order to heal whatever it is that's going on for a person, whether it's mental illness or what would be classified as mental illness, whether it's physical, whether it's, life falling apart, whatever it is, a person has to think outside the box, beyond the duality, into spirit and connect with the true source. That's why shamanism is so useful, because that's what it helps with, to connect with the true source, for which all of these things are possible, and all of them are limited. You have to go into the unlimited and the infinite and the ineffable to access truly deep potential for healing.
I think the more we are caught up in the daily drama, in the soap opera, in the mental construct put out by others in order to basically distract and diffuse power, then we're stuck in the duality. But once you begin to see that there are many opportunities to entertain yourself without being caught up in the daily drama and the negativity that is constantly repeated, perpetuated, and ingrained, then you're free to create and manifest in your own way. Now, that doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect and you're going to win the lottery and all of a sudden your bills are going to be paid. It just means that you have the freedom to change your mind.
Yes, I agree with that, yeah. And it is very personal. That's another thing what I love about shamanism, is you don't have to go to one specific limited philosophy or religion. You can study them all and get something good out of it. But ultimately, I think that's even in the Bible, so we have to put away children's toys and mature. So all of those things were useful at some point. Those structures, I very much value structure. I don't want to destroy any structure. Every structure has a purpose. But eventually, once the structure ceases to be useful for our evolution and maturity, we have to recycle it and build a new structure that's going to help us mature further. And some of those structures are right now being used to sort of hide the truth and prevent people from evolving. But again, that's still, even though it seems like it's being done to us, that's still within our control. And that's the one thing that John was really focused on teaching me and all the students, actually, hundreds of students, that ultimately it's within our mental power to change ourselves and these structures, that we're ultimately not victims of other people or other forces or even these dark forces. No matter how much it seems that way, that's not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that with our internal power, we can change things for the better. And but we have to heal ourselves first in order to do that in the world.
That's like what they say, if the plane's going down, before you help anybody else, put your oxygen mask on, because that's where you start, is put your oxygen mask on, then you can be helpful. So basically right now, fix yourself first, stop complaining about everybody else and figure out how you work. And then beyond that, figure out how that can help others. All right. You have a lot of services we don't have time to get into, but I do want people to, if they're interested, to be able to contact you. So give us the details.
Yeah, so people can simply go to my website and contact me through my website and read about all the incredible success stories that people have had. I have over 100 5-star reviews on my site from people healing from all sorts of things. My website is holistichealthcoachingny.com. That's holistic, that starts with an H, holistichealthcoachingny.com. And Y is for New York. But it's not the full word. New York is just NY. Or you can just look up my name online, Arriale, Starbird in New York City, and they'll find me.
I appreciate your time. And there's just a lot to go into. And you only touched on one client. It was extensive. But this is the kind of stuff I think people are becoming more familiar with and more comfortable learning about alternative ways of healing firsthand from someone who's been there and done that. So thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. The reason I went into one is because it's so interesting, and I have so many, and I figured it will serve people better to know a little more in detail the nitty gritty of what a success story actually looks like, and the spiritual side of it, because you can't get that with regular therapy. You can't get this by going to a doctor. You're not going to find out that you're a hybrid soul and you've had SSP experience, and that dealing with all that will actually heal these deep-seated problems. You're not going to get that anywhere else, really, unless you do this kind of holistic and shamanic work.
Yeah, I agree. You have to heal it at the source, and the pills tend to just medicate and camouflage. But this is when you go to the root and say, let's stop this at the source. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
We've scheduled a second interview. We covered one client today, but she has more information, more topics, and so we'll get into that next time. Between now and then, check in. If you'd like some more information from Arriale, the website, holistichealthcoachingny.com. I'll put links in the description for the show. Thanks for listening. Stay curious.